Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back to Networking RX. This is Frank Agan, founder and president, AmSpirit Business Connections. I appreciate the longtime listeners, the subscribers, and you first-timers tuning into this. This is going to be a good episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about the four horsemen. No, we're not going to be talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse as talked about in the Bible, and that would be death, famine, war, and conquest. And we're not going to be talking about the four horsemen of Notre Dame, which is in reference to the 1924 backfield that they had. And to be honest, I can't tell you who the four horsemen were that played for Notre Dame, but that was kind of their moniker. Today we're going to talk about the four horsemen of doomed relationships. The four horsemen of doomed relationships. And that's not something I've made up. That is something that's real. Now, again, the four horsemen of the apocalypse is a metaphor depicting the end of times in the New Testament. But the Gottman Institute, Gottman Institute, uses the four horsemen as a metaphor to describe communication styles that can predict the end of a relationship. And what is networking? Networking is about relationships. Now, the Gottman Institute talks a lot about, in their research, they deal a lot with marriages and marital relationships. But what I believe and what I find is that relationships are relationships. And as I've said in the past, and I've had guests on who have said, we have one brain. We don't have a separate brain for our professional lives and another brain for our personal lives. We have one brain. And it looks at interactions, whether it's personal or professional, whether it's intimate or something less than that, whatever we might term that. It sees it all the same. It sees betrayal the same. It sees trust as the same. It sees the same. Granted, personal relationships, marital relationships can be certainly more intense for obvious reasons. But nevertheless, our professional relationships mirror what's going on in our personal lives. So I felt a discussion about the four horsemen, as the Gottman Institute talks about it, would be applicable for this particular podcast. Now let me start out by talking about the Gottman Institute. The Gottman Institute was founded by Dr. John Gottman. Let me be fair here. Doctors John and Julie Gottman. It's a couple. And together they have conducted 40 years of research on couples, thousands of couples. And his work on marriage and parenting has been profiled in numerous books and numerous articles. They've done video studies of couples, empirical studies. And through this, they have been very, very successful at looking at a relationship, looking at not just a few minutes of relationship, but not a ton of study of a relationship, but in a relatively short period of time, a 10, 15, 20-minute interaction between couples, they have been very successful in determining whether that relationship will last or not, whether they break up, end in divorce, but there are telltale signs there. And this is fascinating work. Now, this information that they share is nothing groundbreaking, and I'll get to it here in a minute. It's nothing groundbreaking. I was talking to my wife about it this morning, and she kind of rolled her eyes and said, well, geez, any relationship that has those things surely can't last. And that's true, and that's been true through time. So they haven't discovered something earth-shattering, but they have been able to identify it and kind of piece it apart. And as much as none of this is earth-shattering, there are people who remain in relationships where the four horsemen are present. So for our conversations with respect to professional networking, relationships, which is akin to our personal relationships, this is an important conversation to have. An important conversation to have so we can guard against being people who put forth the four horsemen. We can be better at recognizing when we see the four horsemen, as well as if we find ourselves in situations where the four horsemen are present, or any one of the horsemen are present, we can take steps to change the situation. Either get out of it, confront the person, whatever it might be. So quickly, the four horsemen are, and I'll go into these in detail. The four horsemen are: 1, criticism; 2, defensiveness; 3, contempt; and 4, stonewalling. Criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling. So let's take a deeper dive into each of these. The first one is criticism. The first horseman is criticism. And criticism is different than just offering a critique or voicing a complaint. A complaint might be, I was scared when you were running late and didn't call. I thought we had an agreement that we would do that for each other. That's kind of a complaint. It's not a criticism, though. A criticism, as the Gottman Institute talks about it, Dr. John and Julie talk about it, is something that goes to the core of a person's character. As the Gottman Institute details on their website, and there's several blog posts as well trying to explain this, but criticism is an attack on a partner, a relationship partner, that goes to the core of their character, again. In effect, you are dismantling their whole being when you criticize them. So the complaint I shared earlier was actually something I'd gotten from the blog post. I was scared when you were running late and didn't call. I thought we had agreed that you would do that. We'd do that for each other. That's a complaint. A criticism, however, is you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you are that forgetful. You're just selfish. You never think of others. You never think of me. That is a criticism. That goes to the very core of their character. It attacks their character, as opposed to just, hey, we had an agreement. You didn't live up to the agreement. In the criticism, basically saying, you're not forgetful. You're just selfish. You don't think about me. You don't care about me. You're a bad person. That is essentially a criticism. Now, as they talk about is that, people being critical of one another is not necessarily an indicator that the relationship is doomed. Again, it's just one of the four horsemen. But the problem is that criticism can be a precursor, especially if it becomes pervasive. It can be a precursor for far deadlier horsemen to follow. And so we're going to kind of jump into those things. In fact, the second horseman that they talk about is contempt. Contempt goes far beyond criticism. Criticism attacks a person's character. Contempt assumes a position of moral superiority. So when people communicate with contempt, they're just mean. They treat others with disrespect. They mock them with sarcasm, ridicule, call them names, mimic them, use body language such as eye rolling or scoffing. The target of contempt is made to feel despised, lesser of a person, worthless. Now here's a quote from the Gottman Institute website. It's actually a blog post on their website. You're tired. Cry me a river. I've been with the kids all day, running around like mad to keep this house going, and all you do when you come home from work is flop down on the sofa like a child and play those idiotic video games. I don't have time to deal with another kid. Could you be any more pathetic? Now, that's pretty harsh. The one couple is calling the other, and I'm not going to be sexist about it, but the one partner is calling the other pathetic. Games are idiotic. Flopping down on the sofa like a child. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and it's mean-spirited. It's trying to belittle. One partner's trying to belittle the other, and that is contempt. And the Gottman Institute on the website indicates that contempt is probably the single greatest predictor of divorce. When they're working with couples, they say it's the first thing that needs to be eliminated. You can't be mean towards one another. In fact, they profile other research on the website. They say research shows that couples that are contemptuous for each other, are more likely to suffer from infectious diseases like colds and flus. Essentially, when people are contemptuous towards us, it lowers our immune system. It raises our level of cortisol, lowers our immune system. We're more susceptible to being sick because of that. So it is certainly a deadly horseman. It's the second horseman, but it's certainly probably as they put it, one of the deadliest horsemen of the four. Third horseman. The third horseman is defensiveness, and it's typically in a response to a criticism or a complaint. And we've all been defensive, but this is pervasive in a relationship. I mean, it just continually feeds on itself, and essentially, it's happening when one person in the relationship is feeling unjustly accused. They look for an excuse and play the innocent victim, pushing things back on their partner. Again, the website provides a wonderful example of this. In fact, I will put a link to the information I'm quoting in the show notes. But there is a quote or a dialogue that they're quoting in there, and one partner is saying to the other, is asking the other, "Did you call Betty and Ralph to let them know that we're not coming tonight as you promised this morning?" Defensive response: "I was just too darn busy today. As a matter of fact, you know just how busy my schedule was. Why didn't you just do it?" Now, the partner's not only responding defensively, but they're kind of reversing things and throwing the blame back. And what the Gottman Institute suggests someone do in this situation is provide a non-defensive response that kind of accepts responsibility. That's the whole thing with defensiveness. It's that the person is not accepting responsibility for their failure. They may have had a failure, but oh my God, my failure is, I had a reason for it, and even worse, you're the reason for it. You're to blame. You're the reason to blame for whatever. But to the proper response in this situation, a non-defensive response that they have on the website would be, "Oops, I forgot. I should have asked you this morning to do it because I knew my day would be packed. That's my fault. Let me call them right now." Now, I will say this, and they talk about it on the website, is that defensiveness is perfectly natural. I think it's kind of a go-to, especially when we're stressed. We're designed to protect ourselves, and defensiveness is part of it. So when we feel we're being attacked, we're going to become defensive, and that's only natural. But we need to understand and kind of be able to be human about it, engage our prefrontal cortex, our higher brain, and not become defensive and not let it escalate the conflict. Simply take responsibility if there's a failure. Fourth horseman. The fourth horseman is stonewalling, which is usually a response to something contemptuous. Stonewalling occurs when the listener just withdraws from interaction, shuts down, stops responding. It's just not worth it. This is escalating out of control. I'm just taking it. Rather than confronting the issue, they just stonewall. Again, our minds are designed for our primitive minds are designed for fight or flight. And fight is kind of the defensive response, and the other is flight. And flight is just not responding at all. And that certainly doesn't help things. So rather than confronting an issue, a partner or a person in a relationship will stonewall, and they can make evasive maneuvers such as just tuning out, turning away, acting busy, or engaging in obsessive or distracting behaviors. Things they talk about on the website here. What they suggest, if you're in a contemptuous situation or being criticized and you don't really feel like responding, is to simply ask for a timeout. All right, I'm too angry. I'm too angry to keep talking about this. Can we just please take a break and come back to it in a bit? Be easier to address with a calmer mind. There, you're not really stonewalling. You're just saying, hey, let's just take a step back. Let me take a step back. Let me gather my thoughts. Let me gather my emotions. As the Gottman Institute has shown, is that the four horsemen, again, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. The four horsemen will doom a relationship. They absolutely will. A marriage, it'll doom any relationship. Now, I think we've all, if you stop and think about it, we've all had this in our lives. God willing, it's not a relationship within your marital relationship. And if it is, it's something that I would suggest seeking help somehow, some way. And there's lots of professionals out there, and I'm not one of them, that can help with it. But if you stop and you think about it, you'll probably see this in non-marital situations, non-personal relationships. I had a boss, looking at this and reading on this, I had a boss years ago when I worked in public accounting, when I was a tax consultant. I had a boss that he exhibited these things. There was criticism. There was contempt. There was a scoffing. You wanted to go talk to him. He didn't want to talk. He made you feel worthless. And when something didn't happen, it was never his fault. And so I've had bosses like this. I've had clients like this. And it's certainly easier to walk away from situations. You can find another job. You can find another client. But sometimes it's not always that easy. There are people who are stuck in relationships, in marital relationships with these things. It's not always easy to just walk away. I know in working with the job I had, I was there 6.5 years and dealt with it for 6.5 years and just felt like, well, this is how life is. This is, people have bosses like this. And I didn't realize that, no, not everybody has bosses like this. I've had clients where I've had this sort of behavior, and when you're trying to grow a business and you have this sort of behavior and you need the client, you kind of take it and until the point when you don't need to take it anymore. But it's a good thing to recognize. These things are a good thing to recognize so you can walk away from them when you do spot them. You can take evasive action. You can confront people. At this point in time, if I were in that situation again, I might confront somebody, feeling a little more stronger about it, feeling a little more like, hey, you know what? I have options. I've got options for other jobs. I've got options for other clients, and sitting down with somebody and saying, these are the issues I see, and this is something that you need to work on. Yes, I am not perfect, but I am not as bad as you might make me out to be. So again, the four horsemen of a doomed relationship: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Keep those in mind as you see yourself interacting with others. Maybe you've been guilty of them. Be honest, I've been guilty of these things at one point or another. And it's just, sorry. Sorry, those who are listening, that I've been guilty of these things with. I don't laugh, take it lightly, but it's just, I think we're all human and we all make these mistakes. But, being in tune and learning and moving from these things, or moving away from these things, is certainly a powerful thing. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today. And again, I will put the information, the link in the show notes. To wrap up, I just want to remind everybody that AmSpirit Business Connections, as I've said in the past, we are looking to add franchisees to our team. This is a unique franchise opportunity in that it is geared for an aspiring entrepreneur or professional to add on to what they're already doing. All of our franchisees do something else for a few hours in the morning. A couple mornings a week, they work within the AmSpirit Business Connections program. The rest of their time, they're doing other things. They're accountants, they're attorneys, they're financial advisors, they're coaches, they're trainers, they're consultants. Really kind of runs the gamut. If you're interested, if you'd like to talk to me about it, my email is in the show notes, as it always is, and we always provide it at the end of the program, at the end, the outro, at the end of the program, which starts right now.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.